The rear is complete with the exclusion of the sway bar, and I need to figure out exactly where it bolts up. It bolts up somewhere around here, so I'm going to have to drill a couple holes and then tap them. And I don't know if this goes into the trunk or not. I think somebody said it did, and I can always weld some nuts on there later. But I want to get it as close as I possibly can. This is 10 foot-pounds of torque, and this one here is 25 foot-pounds of torque. I went over the torque specs on all the rest of these. I'm probably going to have an issue with this right here. I think this is going to be very hard to move in and out in order to get the toe set on this, and I'm fairly certain that the toe is going to be way off based upon the location of that. I'm fairly certain it needs to go in at least in the middle. So that's the emergency brake cable, the new one, which is a piece of crap. It's a Rebestos, but it's more like a Dorman. If you look at the quality of it, the other side has got real quality. It's authentic. It's close to authentic Honda as possible. All these corners, they wouldn't fit through the slot of this hanger, so I had to take a file and take down all the corners before it would fit in there. So that's everything under here. Let me get under the car. I put this cover back on. I took this cover off about 10 years ago when I replaced the fuel pump in the fuel tank, and I just grabbed some of these. These are not the right clips. The other clips broke, but they'll hold it on there, and they're really not that necessary because these two bolts right here are what really hold it on. But I'll show you the different quality of this one. I hate this one versus what you have over here. I think I tightened those too. I hope I did. I should probably double check that. But that's a much better quality. And then when you look at the straps, those are much better straps too. I mean, those are exactly what Honda and Acura have. And you look at this crappy ass strap over here, and that one. It's a freaking joke. But I put them on. And this aftermarket boot on this crappy one too was a pain in the you-know-what to get in with PETA. I had to remove this heat shield, and I put the heat shield back on. It wasn't too difficult to remove, but the aftermarket exhaust. I was going to put the transmission mount on next, but since I'm going to do an engine swap on this, I'm going to wait until I do that in order to put the transmission swap, or the transmission bushings. And you can see here, that's way off. I mean, it was somewhere here. I don't even think that's tight either. That's another thing I need to do. But there's no real way of pulling that over. I may have to unbolt this, move it over, and then try and bolt it back up again, which, you know, somehow I need to move this thing over. It's such a tight fit in there. That's the one drawback of these. But once you get everything set, you know, you should be fine. So, one other thing is, let's get ready to pour here, which is good. Cool off. You see this hole right here and all this rust. This car had been in an accident on this side before. They repaired it, did a crummy job. So, that's something I'm going to have to fix in the future if I decide to. So, I always wanted to know the difference between the 88 Civics and the 89 to 91, why you couldn't use the same shocks. Well, this would be why. This is the stamped steel, and a different type of shock goes through it. It's got a, you know, your old style shock where it's got a hole, a loop, and this bolt goes through the center of it. So the strut comes through here and attaches there, which is completely different from that setup, whereas it's a fork type. It goes around it, and that would be the reason why you cannot use the later models with the earlier models. And then these would be the bushings for it, which you're supposed to use the sleeves that came in the kit for either this one or this one. I obviously use the sleeves in that one, so I don't have sleeves for this. So there's nothing I can really do with that. I could press those out, but I'm not even going to bother with them. I don't even know if I could maybe use those sleeves. I don't think they're the same, probably the same size. But this is what I have left. I'm going to be starting on the front end. And the front end is going to have upper control arms, and they actually have front end control arm here, bushings. So I hate to press out new ones, but I probably am, you know, and I may change my mind because I may just get Skunk 2 later down the road, and they've already maybe have polyurethane bushings. I'll have to look it up. If they do, then I might as well put these in there. Here are my front struts, bushings, which should be easy. I've already done the rear struts, so I know how that works. The front shock bushing goes in the control arm, lower control arm it should. The front end link for the sway bar. Probably should have got a bigger sway bar, but maybe not. The rack and pinion, I'm going to rebuild the rack and pinion. I have the bushing, and I have the bushing right here. I bought this, only maybe 4 years ago, back in 2011 or 2010, something like that. And it was still around. I wish I would have bought more had I known that they were going to be discontinued and, you know, all gone. So I have this, and I'm going to rebuild it. I was looking at buying a Quaife quick ratio, and people have been complaining about how it's much harder to turn the tires, the rims, and that's probably because they have wider tires as well. I'm not going to be running that wide tires. I'll be running probably a 195 at the most if I get a set of HXs, or if I use the 90 and 91 SI rims that I have. Otherwise, I'm just going to stay with the 13-inch VXs, and I'm fairly certain with a quick ratio on that, that wouldn't be too darn difficult. Talking about, I think, 175, so that's not that wide of a tire. Or I may put the BBS rims on there and go with a 195 or 205. I'm not entirely sure yet. But either way, I have this bushing, and it needs to be rebuilt. And it probably also needs to have the inner tie rods tightened down. I had an issue with those. So that's going to go up there for now. So I'm going to have to rebuild that. So I'll be taking the stuff off little by little, and tie rod boots, that'll go back on after I rebuild the rack and pinion and put that in. Ball joints as well. The transmission shifter, that is going to go in last. I am going to end up pulling the engine and transmission and putting in the D15Z7. And while the engine and transmission's out, I'm going to put in one of these boosters. They're all the same, and I'm guessing I'm going to use that one since the master cylinder is already connected to it. These are Integra ABS 1-inch master cylinders with appropriate boosters, accompanying boosters. So these are hard to get in unless, well, I think they're damn near probably impossible with the CRX if you don't remove the intake manifold. So what better way to install them than after you remove the engine and transmission and there is no intake manifold in the way. So, and then I can bend all my lines if I need to. I'll have easy access to them. I'll go to the junkyard and get other brake lines off of a 4th gen Civic if I need to, and then just bend those. I don't want to, well, I'd like to have a backup because I'll probably just end up bending the one that I have, and if I mess up I'll have another chance of doing it. So, and what's good about these is this does not have the 12mm nut on it, so all these are 10mm, so I don't have to worry about, you know, double flaring and putting it on there with a different nut. I was going to go with the adapter, but the adapter's brass. Brass is very soft. People have said that, you know, you shouldn't be using brass because under extreme pressures it would just blow it out. And I would agree that that sounds logical, especially since they're not using brass anywhere on this car that I'm aware of. Those are metal fittings. And I know they're metal because they rust. So they're clearly not brass by looking at them. So that's what I'm going to do with that. I have the struts, and the struts in the front I ordered KYB XLs, and for the rear, and they ended up sending me GR2s, which I'm fine with in the rear. I wish I could have got GR2s in the front. I think when I go to replace these, that's what they're going to be replaced with. And they come with some hardware, a bracket, some type of sleeve, and then the top nut. So I don't know what the sleeve goes to, but I'll figure it out. And then they have the instructions, and then I have the stainless steel brake lines in the front. So this is all I have left to do for the front. And once I get it back together, bleed the brakes. Oh, I adjusted the parking brake as well. I put that all back together. So, and then you can see the difference in the rear back there, and I wish I would have left that off. And I ended up bending this metal here, this sheet metal, when I was pulling them out. So you want to be careful about that. And this is just a pop-up panel, and then this pop-up panel has a screw on each side. And to adjust the parking brake, you just pull it up one click and then start tightening your nut clockwise. That's connected both cables. And you spin the rim, and when you get a slight amount of drag, that's when you know that your parking brake has been adjusted properly. And then you just, you know, let it back down, and it should be between 6 and 10 clicks. 6, that's 8, and that's plenty. I guarantee you this thing's not going to move. You know, I'd have to have a whole lot of force, and I don't even know if with enough force I could. Well, I'm sure with enough force you probably could move it, but you wouldn't want to. So it's great that the parking brake works. Emergency brake, actually. That's what I'm going to be using it for when I'm testing this thing. So everything is together in the rear, and I'm getting ready to lower it so that I have more space up front to work underneath and start tearing the front apart and taking care of that. And man, this thing should be able to ride so nicely once I bleed the brakes and brand new struts, all new bushing, energy suspension bushings, polyurethane. I can't wait. You know, the engine's obviously a little worn with 250,000 miles, over 250,000 miles, but that's going to get changed too. So this is going to be a very nice car, I hope, for May not look that nice, which is fine. Nobody's going to want to steal it. But it's going to drive nice and be reliable, and that's what I want. So that's the update for today.